Right, so this is a mad idea I had. Instead of doing a written interview with people whose work I like, I thought I'm just going to get a couple of them on Zoom. And the first person is a chap called Nate Williams, who we've never met before, and although we've communicated over the last couple of years, and I am a bona fide fan of this gentleman. Thank you very much for spending the time.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to see your face.
It's a weird one, isn't it? It's like, yeah, we're finally talking.
Yeah, it is really, because I'm not even sure I knew what you looked like.
Okay.
I know your email address quite well. It's nice to put a face to the email address.
So, do you want to introduce yourself and just kind of give a little bit of background about what you do? And
yeah, I grew up as a session musician, really, from quite sort of young. I started gigging really young. Playing drums. I played piano from a really early age, but I started gigging on drums when I was about 13. So I was kind of making sort of reasonable pocket money as a teenager, which was quite fun. Like playing on the end of the pier in Llandudno with my uncle's sort of Dixieland band. And I wasn't like the cool drummer guy at school. I was playing like jazz gigs. So which eventually made me a cool drummer, I guess, once I got old enough, but certainly not at that point. Then moved to London in my early 20s. Started going to jam nights and doing pop gigs and tours and that sort of thing. I've been sort of writing music for as long as I can remember. Ended up landing sort of various pop gigs, most recently the Jamiroquai and Steve Winwood. I've written a few, sort of released probably more than I remember now, sort of solo albums and whatnot, but I've just been a sort of a music obsessive since I was young, really. And then all those other things, sort of some teaching and stuff as well, they all seem to fulfill different parts of that obsession, I guess is the best way to put it.
So what's your earliest musical memory?
It's weird because my memory, first of all, is horrendous. But thankfully, my parents were sort of smart enough to sort of take pictures and whatnot. And there are some cool pictures of me with a 303, maybe? Wow. I forget what it was. Yeah, would that be a TB?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those. Often had headphones on, big Stevie Wonder t-shirts and that sort of thing. Sort of, way too big for the 3-year-old wearing the t-shirts and stuff. But really, I just got fond memories of listening to those sorts of albums. Really, I sort of listened to a lot of Stevie Wonder. There was always some Quincy Jones. I've got fond memories of like George Benson albums on in the house. Loads of Motown.
And that came from your folks.
Yeah, it was a real mix, to be honest. So there was a lot of that stuff, and then mum's side of the family is involved in like the brass bands and stuff locally. So I'd end up going to those things and sort of learn to read music. So I was having piano lessons. So I was playing along with sort of brass bands with mum sat behind me, holding my hands, playing the snare drum or whatever. Super young, 5 or 6 years old, I think. Started piano lessons at about 5, and then was just sort of hearing. So my dad was gigging a lot with various little bands and whatnot. I remember hearing him sort of working out tunes in the other room. And I had a little like PSR, or whatever, those little Yamaha things. And I'd be hearing like, I don't know, like Penny Lane or something going on in the other room. And I'd be hearing this trumpet part, kind of like trying to figure it out on my own keyboard, so just replicating stuff I was hearing, really, which was, I suppose, unusual behavior for a kid at that age. But I kind of, it was probably because I was around so much music, like family, and then sort of going to the brass bands and all that stuff. And then growing up, that was various sort of big bands and that sort of thing as well. I guess being around it so much, it was one of those things, when a kid kind of finds something it's kind of easy, it comes sort of fairly naturally. They're more inclined to kind of carry it on. It wasn't as difficult as, I didn't carry on with a maths career or going to that sort of stuff. So it's just something I've always felt like a real natural affinity for, and like, I don't know, like it's never been a stressful thing, like learning about it or working on it's never been like a chore. Like I'm still obsessed with it. Like it's just a compulsion now to go to the studio and do something. And if that thing I'm working on doesn't go well, I'll just practice this instead, or write this tune or whatever it is. So my earliest memories are all just listen to music at home, and then starting the gigging is really where I've got real sort of clear memories of being 13 and gigging on the end of the pier, and then everyone and all these 50-year-old guys when I'm like 13 or something, and they're all drinking bitter shandies, and they bought me a half, and it just tasted like absolute garbage, to a kid. But,
At the end of London, no fear.
Yeah, it was a very that's quite a strange sort of way into it, isn't it? I guess, but I thoroughly enjoyed myself, turning up, and of course I didn't have to drive or anything because I was too young, so I just get chauffeured around, which is great. Yeah.
The taste of things to come with Jamiroquai.
Well, something like that, yeah.
What did your dad play?
Keyboards.
Okay.
Piano, yeah. Just sort of local bands and that sort of thing. There was a bit of everything really. Mum played piano and like a tenor horn in the brass band. My uncle's a trumpet player. Another uncle's a tuba player. It's just like everywhere in the family. So like Christmas and New Year and stuff, you'd go to a family get together and there'd be all sorts, instruments around and just play tunes all night. Really, as kids, sort of, seeing midnight come and go, just playing Knees Up Mother Brown or whatever, just random. Excellent. Or some traditional Welsh tunes or whatever.
Yeah. Because you were born up in Anglesey. Yeah,
born in Bangor. Yeah, just over the bridge. Was here into my teens through school and that, and then early 20s. I moved to Brighton for a couple of years because I had a few mates down there. So I thought it's kind of a nice stepping stone because London was sort of the goal. Did a bit of session stuff. Worked for a company, like a music website company in Brighton for a while. Got to meet some cool people. Like hung out with like Herbie Flowers and people like that for a bit, which was really cool. Absolute legend, which was an amazing experience. And then ended up in London. Oh, we barely got stuff done because you just kind of tell us another story. Like he's one of the double bass players on Jaws. Like that on its own just blew my mind. Like you're one of those guys who I've heard a million times.
There's so many things with him. I mean, honestly, a legend, an absolute legend.
Yeah, amazing.
I met him and I walked up to him and I said, I've got to shake your hand just for one record only. And of course he was, convinced it was going to be Lou Reed.
Yeah.
He went, Lou Reed, in his cynical manner. And I went, no, Clive Dunn's granddad. And he laughed and laughed and laughed. And he said, I'll tell you a really funny story about that. In that he said, I'd written the song, but I hadn't got the hook.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I called my mate, Tony Hatch. And I said, look, can you come round? Because I've got this song and I just can't get this, the hook's eluding me. He said, and Tony turned up about 10 minutes later and rang the doorbell. And he went, that's the hook.
That's amazing. That's such a good story. Amazing. Yeah, I mean, obviously the Lou Reed stuff, the Bowie stuff, and all that. It's like, I was just sitting in a room with him. We tracked we recreated some tracks, basically, some of the Bowie stuff and Lou Reed and whatever. And got him to play bass, and then we played a couple of standards at the end of the day and filmed them. So there's footage of me somewhere playing like Straight No Chaser or something with Herbie Flowers, which is
on keys.
I was on drums. Yeah, which is mind-blowing.
I find it really fascinating because there's so many people I meet. I mean, I started out by learning keyboards, and then there were way better keyboard players than me, particularly, piano. I realized I was never going to be a concert pianist. Not that I wanted to be that in the first place. And then I switched to drums. And actually, the more people I talk to in this industry, there are so many that started on drums. And what I've noticed is that they all have this inherent rhythmic sensibility in their playing. Even when they switch to keys or bass or whatever, I think it's the kind of fundamental aspect of the groove. It's, if it's in there, it's in there, and it will come out no matter kind of what you play. I don't know.
Yeah, you're not the first person I heard say that. It's definitely there's a pattern to it. I think it sort of really affects how you physically approach an instrument as well. It's kind of like you said, it's if it's in there, but it's also if it's out here, it's kind of you can play. I don't know if it's a coordination thing or if it's a pattern thing. So you might naturally play certain phrases, you know what I mean? Sort of left, not paradiddles, but whatever else you want to kind of think about in terms of rudiments. They're really handy for even as a bass player. I sort of took up the bass at about 14, 15 years old because a mate had a guitar and another mate had a drum kit and we didn't have a bass player. So I thought, I'll do it. But even that, you start watching, or you listen to great bass players, and they've all played drums. Like they all can do that thing. And then of course if you start looking at slap players, that's all it is. Like it's percussion. Like it's two hands doing the thing. So there's a lot to be said to it. And I often encourage. I do a lot of teaching and whatnot. So I'll always tell people to try and learn more than one instrument, particularly if you can get drums and piano as two instruments. I think you've got so much covered in terms of harmony and rhythm. They're two obviously like massive parts of the, or at least pop music, you know, if you for an umbrella term, but certainly worth learning.
Yeah. So kind of who were the key bass influences?
Oh, I went through phases. I mean, the biggest phase was just I just went through a massive Jacko phase, just hard, like didn't play anything other than Jacko tunes. But I tried to copy exact lines and whatnot. There was a local guy when I was growing up playing. There was a few little big band things. I played in some kind of, for want of a better description, jazz funk kind of bands, I guess. There was a guy called Gary Bowker who lived up in North Wales, and I'd never met a bass player who could do those things I heard on records before. So I was 14 playing with this sort of, I don't know, 40-something-year-old bass player who was doing the stuff that I'd heard Marcus Miller do or Jacko do. And I was playing drums with the guy in real life. So it was like a real moment of, oh, you can do that. Like real human beings can do that. It's not just the guy on this album, you know. But yeah, I went mad for Jacko. I actually went mad for Victor Wooten for a while, just because it blew my mind, technically, what he was doing. And I probably lost a few gigs because of learning a lot of that. Nobody needs that in their life. But they were huge. And obviously that leads you to further back, you know, if you say James Jameson, it's kind of, you know, Nathan Watts is a big one with the sort of Stevie obsession. Right? I'm not afraid to say it. But then I suppose sort of going into sort of listening to piano players and jazz musicians a little bit more, you start hearing the sort of Ron Carters and people like that. And and then you realise how many amazing musicians there are and how you're such a tiny part of that thing, you know.
It's amazing. I mean, it's fascinating you say about the Stevie stuff. I know we're both huge fans. When was the first moment that you heard that?
Well, I mean, there are pictures of my mum pregnant with headphones on her stomach. So that stuff is like Songs in the Key of Life is just going in like pre me being in the world. Also, funny enough, there's a video my mum sent to my partner Bex of me dancing to I Just Called to Say I Love You in our first house or whatever, as a maybe 3-year-old, I think. So it was just there the whole time. So obviously I don't really remember those early moments, but I've got moments of sort of listening to, when I was a bit older, really, sort of listening back to songs I thought I knew really well. I recreated Do I Do for one of my sister's birthdays.
Wow.
I don't know how many years ago. Oh, well, I recreated, you know, to the best of my abilities at the time. And sort of delving into what was going on. That was like a moment of, oh yeah, it's not just like harmonically rich. It's not just, doesn't just groove. Like there's so much like arranging and just insane stuff, like taking down the horn parts or the 2 guitar parts and the percussion grooves and stuff. You kind of go, this is like absolute genius. This is insane. So that led me to sort of, I think that really opened my ears up to listening to that stuff in a different way, I suppose. And you'll know, obviously, the layering and the arranging of just the synth parts on some of those albums, particularly on the monophonic stuff. You realise, obviously, there are however many takes to create that rich sort of harmony, just one note at a time. You kind of think that arranging in itself is just incredible. It really is genius, you know.
Yeah, it totally does my head in. I mean, going back and listening to stuff. I mean, for me, I remember being in the car and You're the Sunshine of My Life came on, and I was like, what's this?
Yep.
And obviously albums were expensive back then, and eventually I managed to get my hands on the album. I was probably bought it by my folks. And then I heard tracks like Maybe Your Baby and stuff like that, and it was like, what are the things that make these noises?
Yeah.
And then I followed him incessantly, just absolutely incessantly. But I know we had a sort of discussion about this on email. I dipped in the 80s. I think for me, I mean, although there's some good tracks on Woman in Red, and actually my closest friend Dale, you know, another bass player, he said that actually when you strip away all the schmaltz of I Just Called to Say I Love You, it's still a really good song.
It's a really well crafted out and out pop song, isn't it?
Yeah, but it was, so I kind of dipped, but I think you said you really embraced that period.
I think I really did, particularly in the writing. I think for a while there, where I was sort of trying to figure out my own stuff and what I wanted my own music to sound like, I really did get into the production as well, just those 80s kind of, I guess because I'm I was born in '83, so I suppose there's a thing about that in my head that I think that's probably true of everyone, having that sort of decade. But I think some of the best songs he ever wrote were in that decade. But I think Square Circles is a ridiculous album. I forget what year that is. I'm pretty sure it's 80 something. When was Hotter Than July? That was 80. I'm rubbish with years.
One-ish, two-ish.
Yeah. Woman in Red, like you said, that soundtrack is incredible. It's the 90s I dipped with it. There weren't many, but Jungle Fever, I think, came out 90 something. Forget when Conversation Piece was. That wasn't my thing really, but I think the 70s and 80s were the writing, like on some of those tunes. Still, I listen back to it, and I deliberately haven't worked some of them out harmonically. Obviously, you can sort of hear what's going on, but I deliberately haven't sat down to work out for much of it because I just don't. I kind of don't. It's like the magician thing, you know. I just kind of, it is what it is, and it's beautiful, and I just don't need to know.
Amazing, yeah, stunning. So you go to Brighton, you go to London, and then it's jam night time.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I moved to London and I sort of lived with a girlfriend, and I didn't know people there because I wasn't going to study or anything, so I didn't really know many people. I did know a guy who was teaching at a music college and got a few hours teaching and stuff just to sort of pay rent. Then started going to jam nights. Quickly learned that the best thing to do at jam nights is to not play the first time you go, because if you get up with the people who aren't maybe as good as you'd hoped, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? So they might make you look bad. And I got caught out a few times with a bunch of musicians who are perhaps less than desirable. So I would go and just watch and go, oh yeah, that's a brilliant drummer. Cool. She's a really good keys player. X, Y, and Z. And then next time you go, yeah, okay, we're going to get up, I'm going to play with you. And then you start finding out like a lot of the people who do pop gigs go to those nights to let off steam and have a play and a drink and whatever. Just started meeting people, and thankfully I kind of played well enough to get into the house band and bass at a place called the Troy Bar near Old Street, which I did for quite a while, which was a brilliant way to meet people because I was doing like the fusion night. So we were playing all that stuff I'd mentioned earlier with loads of Jacko tunes and just playing all the stuff I'd always wanted to play with people, and I was kind of doing it in London. It's this big moment of like, I'm doing the thing that, you know, it's that kind of like quiet sort of pride kind of,
yeah.
I've always wanted to do this, and I'm doing it in London, like, you know, the big city lights, because I'm from Anglesey in North Wales. It's like, it feels like a million miles away now. But yeah, so started meeting various musicians who were doing pop gigs and people who were booking people for pop gigs. Got gigs from some of them, didn't get gigs from others, but it was still a really nice way to sort of meet people. And I've made some really good friends through that stuff, and I'm still in touch with a lot of them. And yeah, some of my favorite musicians ever I met playing at the Troy Bar, just mind-bendingly fantastic musicians. It's amazing, really.
It's fascinating. I think that's the best way to kind of learn your craft. I know that, I mean, certainly when Dale moved there, when he was quite young, I mean, he said it was pretty lonely at first, you know, but
Sure.
He was out every night, just playing jam nights. I remember at the time there was a place called Singers, which was up Tottenham Court Road. I think it's a Spearmint Rhino place now, but, you know, a great venue. And that was Monday nights. And basically it was kind of the showcase for all the singers.
Yeah.
So the house band was there, and they were like, and I mean, honestly, we'd turn up and it would be like Alita Adams and Beverly Knight. And then it was like, you know, in the audience, it was like, oh, there's a brass section from Beggar and Co. and Incognito, and there's so-and-so from so-and-so. So the whole thing just became really vibey. And again, you know, once you've got a reputation for being the guy who turns up and he's reliable and enthusiastic and keen, and he's got his chops together, slowly these things start to kind of come together.
For sure, yeah.
Also working with other people in various house bands. Who was in your house band?
It changed, but the people who've really stuck in my head, and I apologize to anyone who, if I don't name them, but there's a drummer called Marius Alexa, a Lithuanian guy, who was the first person I kind of heard and thought, oh, this guy's like serious. This is, yeah, he's the guy I just want to play the rest of my gigs with, like forever. He's doing really great stuff now. Plays a lot with Bill Lawrence from Snarky Puppy, and he's doing a lot of really cool stuff like that. There's a sax player called Roberto Manzin, who, if you shut your eyes, you would just think it was Brecker playing. And that, again, having grown up listening to the stuff I listened to, you know, it's like, what is going on? I can't believe my luck, you know. A keys player called Oscar Steeler, learned a lot playing with him. There were just so many. There's a guitar player called I didn't do many with him, but a guy called Ant Law, who you might have heard of, but he has his guitar tunes in fourths, which is like his. I don't know why it happened, but that's what he does, and people kind of talk about that being his thing. But he's just a ridiculous musician. I just remember kind of listening to. Obviously, you're playing and you're listening, and occasionally the listening takes over, and you kind of lose yourself in like listening to that guy sound like Brecker. And you're like, oh no, I still need to keep playing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a really kind of, I guess, a weird, like you, Dale said, like it was kind of lonely at times, but you'd go out and that would be, you'd get there for sort of 10 and you wouldn't get home till sort of 3 or 4 or something. But that was like, you were hanging out with your mates, which you didn't do much of during the day because you had to either go and teach or like earn a bit of money. But that was, you go and let off steam and just hang out. And yeah, it was kind of I don't think about it often enough really, but when I do talk about it like this, I do think about how sort of special the time it was. It was kind of a lot, learned a lot and met a lot of really, really cool people.
Yeah, the kind of vibey days, the really vibey days.
Yeah.
I remember them incredibly fondly, probably because I wasn't good enough to kind of stick at it. But did you, were you formally trained?
I had piano lessons as a kid, yeah, from 5 till about, I think felt like I was a bit cool for it at about 16 years old. And then I started getting into sort of, I guess, just different types of music, because the piano lessons, it sort of inevitably ended up sort of revolving around classical music, which there's nothing wrong with. But at the time, my taste started sort of going another direction. And perhaps at the time, I didn't quite see the link. Of course, there is a really obvious link. But I kind of didn't see the merit of kind of working on this Beethoven stuff. So I think I left after I did my sort of grade 6 exams, I think, started working on 7 and then thought, yeah, I'm kind of into this. I've just been listening to this Herbie Hancock thing. And I want that. And not realizing that there's so much of one in the other, So that's the only training really. I had a few sort of drum lessons and whatnot, but yeah, just piano lessons. And then I learned a lot of, in terms of reading music and stuff in the brass bands and orchestras and whatnot. I played in big bands and stuff over the years. That was amazing. I think you learn a lot from reading music, sort of playing with other human beings. That's a big skill. A lot of people maybe don't realize, isn't it? Super important. And even just the social side of it, like how to be with other people. Yeah,
work with other people. I think it's really fascinating. Dale and I always kind of had this discussion, whether, I mean, because it was it still is a phenomenal bass player.
Mm.
And as a drummer, I just sit in the pocket as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, at that time, people like Dylan Howe were doing the kind of jam nights and stuff. And I mean, technically, it was amazing. And Dale was very much like, well, you can learn technique, but you can't learn feel. Mm-hmm. And I was always kind of like, no. Actually, if you develop your technique, then you will learn feel. And it was it was a really interesting kind of period for me, because I got to a certain point and it was like, yeah, I felt like, Dale and I were going out as session duos.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt I was kind of holding him back. And then I obviously got a break on the kind of tech side of things.
Sure.
And that was our kind of parting of the ways. But those, certainly those years, I look back on as being the kind of halcyon years for me.
Yeah,
fun years. And they were really vibey as well, because we're talking, 90, 91. So you had the whole soul thing, Karen Wheeler, De La Soul, and it was all very kind of positive and upbeat. I wonder now in fact, at the time we were talking about, we were starting to get music colleges happen.
Yeah.
Obviously you had the guys who went to Royal Academy like Arden and stuff like that. But you had these music college people, and they seem to almost, I don't want to be disrespectful in any way, because a phenomenal player is a phenomenal player, but they kind of, in a way, in those early days, they felt like, it felt to us like they were kind of churning out clones of America.
Yeah, it's not the first time I've heard that either, really. It's a difficult one, isn't it? I suppose there's something to be said for kind of doing your own thing, but I think there's so much, you can learn so much in those places, and I didn't go and study at university, but I have the odd moment where I think, perhaps I'd know more about this if I did, or whatever. But I feel like you can kind of do it the other way. It's just probably just takes longer, but you've got to be kind of really dedicated and obsessed, which fortunately I was, but I still am. But the clone thing's an interesting one. I think the only clones that come out are the people who don't put the extra work in to sort of apply the stuff they've been taught. I think you can really apply it and make it your own, or you can come out playing all the Charlie Parker licks that everyone else is playing. which are amazing, but
yeah.
But they're Charlie Parker licks.
Yeah. No, it's really fascinating. So, what point did you start writing your own stuff?
I'd written stuff since I was pretty young, and I've gone through phases of listening to. I went through a really big like Pharrell NERD kind of phase, and started sort of messing around with like a little 12-track, a little digital 12-track thing. And in my sort of mid-teens, I guess that sort of started happening. But in terms of my own stuff, where I got to about 30 years old and thought, oh yeah, this is a thing. I've written these songs and I've produced them myself, played all the stuff, and I could give you this disc and not say, oh, sorry about the BVs on track, whatever. Like that was the first time where I felt confident enough to really kind of put something out there. So that was my first album, which was 2014. Was I 30? Maybe 31 then. Anyway, Got to Let Go, which was like 12 or 13 tracks of tunes I'd written over, some of them over a sort of long period, and they've gone through various. There's usually sort of 2 or 3 versions of each song before I settle on the one I'm happy with. But it was weird. I'm surprised it sort of took me that long, really. But I think to be honest, it was just a confidence thing for me, really. There's a lot of kind of self-doubt sort of just lingers in there, and you think, was that good enough? Was that, because I always think you want to put your best self forward, and if I put an album out, that's who people are going to think I am. So I have to be kind of happy with it. Of course, looking back, there are things I would definitely do things differently now, but that's why you release new albums, right? You're showing where you are now, and it's just a snapshot. I like to think of it as that's where I was, or who I was at the time. And things have changed. My tastes have changed. My skill set's changed. I've improved in various areas. Maybe I've dropped in others, I don't know, but I certainly feel like I've progressed as a writer and arranger and stuff. So it's nice to have those things out there to be able to even just to sort of see that happen, I guess.
I mean, there's some great songs on that album. I mean, the opener, Best Friend, for me is just like, the minute, and it's an instant attention grabber. And as soon as you hear it, it's reminiscent of other things, and it's just like right. Everything just worked.
Oh, thanks. I mean, yeah, that's. I can't really remember sort of starting that tune, but I remember finishing it, and I remember deciding to change key into verse 2, which I thought nobody really did. I thought I'll change key from B to D. I'll go up a minor third and see what happens, and it sort of just felt really good. And there are a few tunes on that I'm super proud of. There's, like, compositionally, I think there's a tune called "Don't Want to Talk About It," which is sort of pretty inspired by that In Square Circle album, which, like, harmonically. Sort of parallel movements and stuff I sort of wouldn't have done before, but I was kind of just trying these things out and kind of thinking, well, I can just, of course I can just play that chord and then move that exact shape here and the exact shape here, and it was just a different way of doing it. But I'm kind of really happy with some of the results. But I got so many questions from people about the last track, which is called Flatlined, and the track basically it's about like a relationship going to an end or whatever. And the track sort of ends really unexpectedly, like in the middle of a word. And loads of people saying, "Oh, was that a mistake? Like, did the CD factory get it wrong or whatever?" It's like, no, it's called Flatlined, and like death of a relationship, which is instant or whatever. I had to explain that to people so many times, which maybe it was trying to be too clever. But
that's cool. I mean, we got 13 tracks on the album. They got that far.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I guess those are the days. I've not really. I'm working on one now, actually, but I've only released the EPs since then. I just realised not many people have got the attention span for albums. Really, I think people want their favourite tracks, don't they?
It's bizarre. Yeah, I mean, there's constantly music playing when I'm working, when I'm not actually doing anything musically. If I'm writing a manual or trying to work out some tech stuff, there's always music playing. And actually, I love the album format because to me it feels like a journey.
Yeah.
But there are moments where it's like, I want this track, this track, this track, and this track. But that's usually when I'm in the company of somebody else and I'm going, you got to listen to this person.
Right.
And then you're kind of picking what you think are the highlights. Really interesting. So, and how was that album received?
It was good, actually. I mean, again, my memory is sort of so bad, but I remember kind of seeing it get into the iTunes charts of like the R&B charts, whatever it got to. I sort of think it was in the top 10 or maybe 5. friend of mine worked for Apple at the time, and he got me managed to get a little banner on the iTunes store and stuff, and it was really cool. It came out on the same day as Jessie J released something, so I was never going to. I got absolutely battered by Jessie J, I think, but there's less auto tune on my just. Yeah, it was really cool actually, and to be able to sort of gig it and stuff, and for do the occasional gig, and you realise some people know the words. Like there were people who were sort of singing along, and you kind of go, "Oh, this is mad." Even if it's 10 people who know the words, you kind of think, "Oh, that's a really cool thing that somebody's found it, has enjoyed it." And that album, I probably should have said this already, was the first time I'd kind of had this real sort of epiphany of going, "Yeah, write the stuff that you would want to listen to when you get home." That's like success. A tiny level. For me, that's like a really successful thing to do. If I still want to listen to that album 8 years later or whatever it is. And also, if I like it, there's 7 and a bit billion people on the planet. Like someone else will like it. The chances of no one else liking the thing I've made, come on, like somebody's going to be into it. So that gave me a bit of confidence to just kind of go, yeah, this is it. This is what I've made. Now, if you like it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. And then funnily enough, it found its own little sort of pockets of like Italy. There was some like real kind of big sort of I won't say fan bases, but there were sort of big groups of people in Italy who were really into it. I think Japan. Yeah, it was a really interesting thing to see how certain parts of the world really took to it.
Yeah, fascinating. And what came after that?
There was a bit of a gap then for a while. I can't remember if it was because making an album was such a big thing to do. It took quite a while. But then there was an EP called Them and Us, which came after, which was a bit of a departure, really, I think sonically at least, and the writing had taken a bit of a turn. And I think really that's when I started to really find my feet in terms of the writing and the production, everything, and putting everything together. That was an EP with I think 5 or 6 tracks on, and there's some stuff on there which I'm super proud of. That's like, I think some of the it's not meant to sound like a boast of any kind, but I think it's definitely some of the best stuff I've written. And I don't know what changed really. I mean, time is the only thing I can think of. There was a bit of time for me to sort of digest what I'd done and how it'd been received, and then sort of realizing maybe a bit more about sort of who I was what I wanted to become or something as a writer, I think. But it was, yeah, definitely some of my favorite tunes on that.
I think that was the EP. I can't remember how I discovered you, but
I think it was that one. I recall a conversation we had about there's a bass sound on one of those tracks, and you were quite nice about it, and I was really chuffed because I obviously knew about you and your products.
Was it Lying Eyes?
Yeah, it was that. Yeah,
I mean, it's phenomenal, man. Absolutely phenomenal.
And I think it was maybe a little fatty or sub 37, I think, in it, but it was that squelchy kind of bass thing, and yeah, you said some nice things about it, which kind of blew my mind. So I've kind of held on to that quite a long time.
No, honestly, and I wasn't intending to be flattering. It was just the way. I mean, honestly, when I played it through the first time, I was like, first of all, number one, awesome song, love the arrangement, love the voice, and everything else. And then it was like, at what point am I going to find a filler here? Nope, none at all. And then to close on Lying Eyes with that enormously beautiful bass line.
Thanks, man. And that was the first time I think we've done it with the horns, done anything with the horn guys as well. Tom Walsh in his section, which changes a little bit, but he's kind of the backbone of the thing, and he sort of helps. I think wrote, I don't know about all of the arrangement, but I say most of that arrangement was Tom Walsh with the horn stuff, and then we tracked it in a rehearsal studio somewhere in King's Cross, and it just was amazing. It was the first time I'd been there to see them do it, and it was on my stuff, and he sounded like Jerry Hay. I was just losing my mind, just. I think Tom did a lot. He studied, I think, a bit with Jerry, and they're sort of good friends, and Tom's done a few sessions for him and stuff. So there's some real respect, I think, there to have Tom play. He's done quite a few things for me now, and he's brought in like Larry Williams did a couple of things for me, and with like Nigel Hitchcock, and sort of just it's
And
crazy
then
stuff. That
you engineer the album and produce it as well as playing.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah. So the first album was engineered by a friend of mine who's based up here, actually, Russ Haynes. I just spent, I don't know, was it 4 or 5 weeks maybe in his studio? We just tracked it all there. I'd worked a lot of the MIDI stuff up, so anything that I wanted to sort of take from the Logic session, I just kind of exported it to him, and then we tracked drums and anything else that needed to be tracked. But the other stuff, anything since then has been tracked just at mine, yeah. And I've never really had the space to record real drums, so barely any of it up until recently has been real drums. It's all been sort of programmed, and occasionally me trying to sound like a real drummer on programmed drums, and then realised a couple of times you don't need to do that. They can just be programmed drums. It's fine. Now I've got space for real drums, so the next album is mostly just me playing things in real time, and it's not very on the grid, and it's a little bit loose, which I'm trying to embrace a little bit. But that EP, Them and Us, yeah, is all, I think, programmed. Yeah. Apart from,
wow.
Well, drum wise, apart from playing.
So I've seen your finger keyboard drumming. I'm
actually, only because I never had drum. Like I didn't have a full drum kit as a kid, so I just got quite good at playing drums on a keyboard. I got, I'm not ashamed to say, I got really good at it.
There was a video that you put up, and I'm just like, oh man,
it's quite fun. I think the videos I've put up has just been making fun of really busy drummers sometimes. It's just which is a stupid thing to do, really, because they're amazing. They're often just amazing drummers and with a lot of energy. But yeah, it's been it's kind of a slightly wasted youth, I think. But
so that album was when are we talking with that EP?
2017 maybe.
Okay, I've got okay, because I'm looking at it on Deezer here, and but their dates are always kind of weird. And
yeah, I want to say 2017. So it came out when I was on tour. I was walking on a beach, and I remember listening to it from Spotify or iTunes. And I don't know why I'm telling you this, and this might not be of interest to him, but there's a BV line missing from one of those songs, which just haunts me, and I can't believe I didn't notice it. Like I must have listened to those songs. So as you would know, when you're putting something like that together, you listen to those songs thousands of times. I was just walking on the beach on the west coast of America, just going, no.
Whoa, that's it. Now
it's missing.
You set me a challenge. I'm going to see if I can find it at some
Literally
point.
Nobody would care or know, but I've always been aware of it. But it's on Lucky Me, that song.
Okay.
There you go. You can see if you can find it.
Yeah, I will. I'll email you. So how and when, I mean, obviously the $64 million question, how and when did the Jamiroquai gig come about? And kind of what's your role within that, or what was your role?
Well, firstly, the role was, I guess, because COVID's put a stop to everything. I sort of don't know what's next, but certainly has been since 2017, sort of second keys. So Matt Johnson, who I think you know, he's sort of like main keys and Rhodes, and this guy's, his kind of crazy synth setup. I'm on sort of auxiliary keys, guitar, and backing vocals. So covering various things, really, sort of various parts from the latest sort of album. It's pretty heavy in terms of production and stuff. So there's plenty going on. And for the older tunes, I'm sort of triggering some string samples and playing string parts and covering Rhodes parts and that sort of thing. And singing and some second guitar parts. I got the gig. I did a 40th birthday party gig in Claridge's for somebody who actually wasn't that nice. And she insisted on being in the sound check and stuff, and just kept turning everything down, and wanted instrumental versions of just pop, like R&B songs. So no vocals, just guitar playing melodies and stuff. Friend of mine, Jared, on drums, Ross, was it Mike? Anyway, playing guitar. And this guy, Rob Harris, was playing guitar. I was like, oh yeah, nice to meet you, man. Blah, blah, blah. Did the gig, shared some sort of pretty horrendous jokes in the break, sort of egging each other on to see who's got the most sort of distasteful jokes. Kept in touch. I sent him that album, which was the only thing that had come out at the time. I got to let go album. And I'd been teaching like that in the sort of following days. I was teaching at a music college, and I was waiting for the train, and he called me, and he said, we're looking for someone to play like second keys and guitar. Would you be interested in sort of doing some Jamiroquai touring? Sure. Why not? So yeah, it was kind of that really, and went down to Jay's for what I think I was the only person that went in. And the multi-instrumental thing, I guess, is helpful for that sort of gig. You can sort of spin around to the guitar chair and stuff. But I went down to Jay's and played. Rob, Paul, and Matt were there. Said, "Oh, can you play?" Got a bit of notice. Said, "Play string parts for this and Rhodes on this." And one of the new tunes called "Vitamin" on the latest album, Matt said, "Oh yeah, take a solo on Rhodes." So I did, and Jay came sort of running in. I think he was sort of a bit under the weather at the time. And he just came in and he started dancing around. He said, "Oh, who do you think you are, Patrice Russian or whatever?" And it's sort of like joking in my ear. So I was kind of, yeah, it must be going all right then. Like he's sort of into it, which was cool. And then that was it. I got off with the gig, and then it was just over 3 years of pretty heavy touring. And, yeah, saw parts of the world I never thought I'd see, which is amazing. Like such a good opportunity, to meet people and hang out with people I never thought I'd hang out with, and yeah, super cool. Sort of bumping into Vinnie Colaiuta and Herbie and people backstage, and you can go, where am I? It's mad,
And sizable audiences as well.
Yeah, it was my first real experience. I'd done sort of arena tours before, but usually as support. So you get pretty serious numbers in there, but it was never sort of rammed. People were still coming in. But then you go to this thing, and of course, it's heaving. Sold out at the O2 for a couple of nights and stuff. We did a little gig in Paris, and then we did the Roundhouse, which, as you know, it's not an arena. That was a really cool, packed, like really kind of a great atmosphere, because you could see everybody. It was a really fun gig. Obviously, then the arenas, it's like you can see the first 10 rows, and then it's madness. Until they put their phones on, which is incredible.
Wow.
And the lights come on, which is a really fun experience. But yeah, that's thanks to Jared for booking me for that 40th birthday thing, and Rob happened to be on the gig. And that was it.
Because Rob always used to kind of, even when he wasn't working, he would just go out and play. It was either doing function gigs or all sorts of stuff. I mean, that guy just kind of never stopped playing.
He's like the busiest guy, yeah. But Rob is, this might sound like hyperbole or whatever, but I think he's like the best rhythm guitar player like in the world.
Wow, okay.
I don't know many people who are the best thing at something in the world. I genuinely would put Rob's rhythm guitar playing up against anyone's. Like his time is phenomenal. Like it's insane. Like I would just urge you to go and watch videos of him play. It's just ridiculous. He
helped me with a track on my album. And honestly, people were going, "Is that you on guitar?" I'm like, no, it's this guy. In fact, yeah. Rob was very good friends with a very good friend of mine, Shane Meehan, whose dad was the Shadows drummer. And Shane was a drummer. In fact, Shane kind of took over my gig with Dale when I went off and did the kind of tech thing. The reason I went off and did the tech thing was because I was a drummer and I knew about tech, and all of a sudden people were going, "Can you program a drum machine to sound like a drummer?" I was like, well, yeah, because when we do a fill, we don't play all those things at the same time because we've only got 2 feet and 2 amps. And it was quite an easy gig for me. But yeah, and Shane took over, and Shane was very good mates with Rob. And actually, when we started this company, although it wasn't in this kind of guise, we did a launch party at Abbey Road, and Rob came to it. And I was only looking at some pictures yesterday of a very, very, very young Rob, who I think was playing with Peter Andre at the time. Right. I remember Shane saying to me, "This guy," and Shane was no slouch as a drummer. I mean, it was in his blood. And it was like, this guy. And then when I heard him play for the first time, I think that was just on a session. I can't even remember. I think it might have been something Shane was doing or had done and sent me. It was like, whoa. And then, yeah, just kind of years later, I said, "Don't suppose you put some licks down on this faux disco track I'm trying to do about growing up in the 70s? And he was like, "Yeah, I'd love to."
He's got a real ear for sort of arrangement as well. He's not just like he can churn out like 16th note grooves with it like anybody, but then he, in the verse or whenever it needs to be, like he can make this really tiny guitar part just feel amazing. Like you listen to like Little L or something like that, like the hooks and stuff he can come up with, or he talks a lot about making voicings really small so he can stay out of the way of this and that. And he's not just like smashing out 16th note sort of funk grooves. Like he's really considerate and musical with this. So it's sometimes I'll just sort of watch him on a gig. I just sort of forget to play. Just really enjoy him and Shola playing together. There's a real cool thing between those two.
Yeah. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. So obviously, even during that, you were still writing.
Yeah, like when I say obsessed, like it's just like hotel rooms and whatever. Like it's just happening all the time. So yeah, in terms of my own stuff, after that, Them and Us EP, I'd started working on the Halfway Home, I think it was EP, which I'd sort of decided. I go through phases of sort of being a bit bored of my own writing, I think, and then I sort of decided, why don't you? Because I grew up playing a lot of jazz gigs and stuff, and I've got a real massive soft spot for just real books and just standards and beautiful songs. So I thought, why don't you write, I guess, like poppy jazz standards, like pop, not super pop, but jazz standards which have got like a pop sensibility. I don't really like that word, but that's the word I'm going with. So with no big chorus necessarily, like an A section and a B section, and that's it. So then you've got to kind of like the melody's got to be beautiful, the harmony's got to be interesting. So you can't rely on the big production. And it's really small drums. It's like a tiny string quartet. It's piano, all Rhodes, like bass. It's not heavy, like it's super kind of spacious in a way. I guess there's loads of room for everything, and so you can't rely on, if something's harmonically dull and melodically stagnant, you've got to kind of dress it up, with all the other stuff. But I kind of wanted to do the other thing and like make sure production was really minimal. So you have to kind of just write a song, like a real song. So I kind of set myself that challenge really, and I'm sort of really proud of that EP in particular, because it's I did all the string arranging and stuff for it and engineered, I think, everything. It was like a real compositional moment for me, I guess, without sounding too sort of up my own backside. It's, I look back on that super fondly.
Yeah, again, honestly, amazing EP. Completely yours, completely mine. Slays me pretty much every time. And I won't go into some of the other stuff, because I have welled up on some occasions.
Oh man, that's nice. That's one tune where that's one of the tunes that does have a bit of a chorus, but I kind of had this slightly, I guess again at my own backside idea of, so that and the tune after it have a really similar chord sequence, pretty deliberately. The one, the Completely Yours, is in A, and Hope, that comes after, is in A flat. So I had this idea that one would fade out and also slightly change in pitch over a minute. So it fades out from A to A flat. So it fades in volume and sort of dips in key over the course of a minute. I didn't really find anything that could do it as smoothly as I would like. So I was kind of automating that pitch tool,
Wow.
But I kind of got there. Some people didn't notice. Some people who know me well said, your voice is changing. Like, why does your voice sound different? Like towards the end of that fade, you sound unusual, like something's wrong with your voice. But yeah, there's some tunes on that Halfway Home is one I'm really proud of, because it's just
a phenomenal song. I mean, honestly, that's the one that gets me welling up. There's no question.
Oh, thanks, man. I mean, it's kind of meant to be a bit of a what's the word? Basically, it's in 3 sections, and I just kind of like the idea of writing something about sort of being a kid, sort of now knowing what you know now, and then sort of looking forward and sort of wondering what life will be like in sort of 30 years or whatever, and will I've done enough to sort of be happy at the end of it or whatever. So yeah, well, I'm glad that it kind of does some.
And am I correct in thinking one of our things is on that, or am I
on the EP?
Yeah.
Well, your stuff's all over all of my stuff.
Okay.
I mean, so much so I'll struggle to tell you what. It's just pretty drenched. But there's a lot of oddity on stuff.
I remember you saying you were using one of the Tonto presets.
I went nuts for that.
Which with me was just like amazing. I mean, because I love that duophonic nature of it and stuff. And
that's on the first album. The Tonto thing's on that track "Miss You" on the first album.
Wow.
Yeah, there'll be loads of it. Honestly, it's yeah. I don't think I've told you a couple. I don't think you realise quite how much of it. There'll be some on pretty much every release. Yeah, I'm kind of mildly obsessed. There's stuff on the new album as well, which I'm working on at the moment. So
awesome. And of course, you were massive at the beginning of the lockdown thing with us, because obviously COVID had hit, and it was like, I mean, no one knew what was going on. I mean, obviously it was kind of nightmare. I mean, we were kind of like, okay, if we can survive till October, that'll be a good thing.
Sure.
And I was in such a, I've got elderly relatives to take care of, and obviously young family and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and it was like the business, and oh my God, it could all kind of fall apart because nobody knew, you might walk outside your door and catch this kind of killer virus.
Of course, yeah.
And I just kind of decided, in fact, it was Jamie Liddell, who I'd done a Sonic Talk podcast with, who had done something with Heimbach, and they'd done this kind of loop pack. And he mentioned that he had done these tronized vocals effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that, because obviously it's a lung thing, and it's all about, I mean, obviously it screws your voice and whatnot.
Yeah.
I know a few singers who've been very badly affected by it. So for me, I needed something to focus my head, and I went to Chris, business partner, and just kind of went, I've had this idea based on what Jamie had said. Can we do this kind of, in fact, originally, I think we were going to call it the COVID choir, but then it was like, no, let's not do that. And then gradually, as I was talking to, loads of, in fact, the funny thing is obviously, as they weren't working, a lot of them were like, well, what am I going to do today? I'll tell you what, I'll call Dave.
Yeah.
Which was brilliant, because it kept my mind straight. But obviously I was still working like a lunatic normally. And there were moments where it was like, okay, yeah, all of a sudden you've got a load of time. But I remember calling people up and just saying, I've had this mad idea, and we just want to give it away, and it might just send some kind of good vibes out into the world. And obviously you were one of those. And I mean, yours and Jamie's, I mean, everybody who contributed, some of the contributors are amazing. I mean, Matt Berry, who I think just did it on his iPhone for me. I think I probably spent a month doing that, and that just focused me and kept me slightly removed from all the madness.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I don't think you quite realize that if you ask me to do that, like for me, because I've used your stuff for so long, like to be involved personally, it was like a real, like amazing thing for me to be able to do. So I was really happy to contribute, and I just sort of wondered what I would find useful to try to contribute that. And then mine, I suppose, is somewhat polished, but I do also really like Matt's. I think Jamie's to an extent as well. They're slightly less. I don't know what's the word. Maybe polished is the word. Like Matt's, certainly you can hear the inflections and stuff. The occasional note doesn't start on the note, and there's a little kind of bend and stuff. But I really love that, especially when you start playing chords. You get these really interesting little inflections and stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, yours are on there.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I couldn't kind of ask everybody else and then go, I'm not doing it.
It's great. I think it's a really lovely thing, especially then you can start combining people. It's a really interesting.
For me, when it started coming together, and when I was doing that, I was like, right, let's see what Matt's like with Nate, and let's see what and it was just like, wow. Yeah, I mean, so again, thank you very much for that. I was sort of hugely appreciative of that.
If you open mine the do's and play Mr. Sandman, you can have that for free. Do.
Actually, what was great is when we did put it out, again, I was on Sonic Talk, and there's a guy, Yoad, who's quite an amazing mix engineer.
Yeah, I know him.
His credits are pretty astonishing. And he said, there are a lot of vocal libraries out there, but there's nothing there's nothing that's immediately useful like this that can just add a bed or just a little bit of feel. And I was like, wow, okay, we did all right then. And I had so many amazing messages from people after we put that out. It's just like, because people were stuck at home with their systems and, just trying to make music. And in terms of your setup, so what's Logic's obviously the heart of your system.
So, but my sort of studio setup is, I'm renting a room actually from the same brass band I grew up playing with, which is like a weird sort of turn of events. I mean, sort of just Logic, but then also sort of recording as much as I can now, sort of live in the room, just real instruments. I not long ago I bought a Beverly drum kit, 1970 something, I think. Got a reasonable sort of collection of mics there. I won't get into details. It's probably the same bunch of stuff that everyone else uses. I've lucked out to get a long-term loan of a Rhodes from a friend of mine, which is great. 73, but mainly kind of using a lot of plugins and stuff. Really, I've got some stuff from the touring. So I've got a Prophet 6. I've got the Moog, or Moog, I should probably say, sub 37, and then I'm just a lot of the time it'll be kind of recording plugins, but trying to record it as audio as often as possible. I do like recording MIDI so I can correct any inevitable mistakes. It's not a really complicated sort of setup, really. I just like whatever I've got to be close so I can just do things quickly. And I'm always sort of tinkering with something. I'm kind of vaguely sort of obsessed with plugins, I think. I sort of need to stop myself from sort of buying too much in terms of sort of virtual instruments. And I've gone mad for sort of processing plugins at the moment, like channel strips and whatnot. But I'm sure I could go into a lot more depth of the gear I've got, but I don't know if that's of interest, really. It's kind of it's definitely not quite as nice as your place there, but
it's weird because this was here because I was the CS80 was here because I was completing the video for the CS80 that I put out when COVID hit, and it's so heavy I can't get it back to.
I was going to say, no one's moving it.
No one's volunteered to do it. There was a Mellotron over there, which we had piano movers come and move. But I'm kind of constantly moving stuff. I mean, this is kind of in my home, but I'm constantly moving stuff between here and the kind of main studio, depending on sort of what tasks we're on, or kind of sometimes, I mean, at the minute, I've got the OBX in the background and the Prophet 5 Rev 3, and there's a historic interest because the OBX was the kind of Oberheim, oh shit, I better make something to compete with the Prophet 5 product. And I thought, it'd be really nice to kind of just sit and compare the two. Really interesting as well, because on like Japan's Tin Drum, which was another kind of big synth album for me growing up, when I spoke to Richard Barbieri, who used Prophet 5, he said actually a lot of that was done by Dave Sylvian on the OBX. And I was like, okay, I need to sort of explore this. Like you say, it is an obsession. Somebody once said to me, it's not a gift, it's a curse.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. It's like it's a weird thing to. It's not even a conscious thing anymore for me. It's kind of I'm just going now. Like I've found myself I'm on my way. Obviously things have changed. We spoke recently. We've had a baby almost 10 weeks ago.
Yes.
So that's changed a lot of stuff. But Bex is amazing, and I'll occasionally sort of go to the studio for a bit. Hopefully I can come in and sort of do some baby stuff while she gets to go and do whatever she wants, and still trying to be creative, and productive in that sense. Because even though you're desperate to spend time with the baby, in the back of your mind there's also there's ideas and stuff going on, so you kind of go, well, I don't want to forget that thing or whatever it is. So laptop and stuff set up at home just to do bits and bobs, but find myself on. I can do other, lyric writing and Sibelius arranging stuff and that sort of stuff at home, which is cool. So it's sort of finding the balance, but like you said, it's that thing of you're not even thinking about it. It's just happening. Like I'm just at the studio now and I'm playing. How did this happen?
So apart from daddom, what's the next move for you?
I want to get this album done. I've given myself a deadline for mixing in sort of mid-February. I did a lot of the work before the baby arrived, so it's in good shape. Got some lyric stuff. I've got some really exciting people featuring, which I don't want to mention yet, just in case anything falls through. But I can't believe my luck with some of them. Like, people just agreed to do it. That's the beauty. That's one really good thing about social media is you can reach out to people. My mind is sort of blown with some of it. So hopefully that comes off. I've got Tom Walsh and his guys involved to do some horn stuff. I'm really excited to put it out because I think this will be the last one for a while where I'm sort of kind of real instruments, and I feel this need to go back and explore some of those sort of program things again for some reason. But I'm really enjoying seeing that snare hit not quite on the grid and just going, does it feel good? then leave it. Because the more and more I listen to my favorite music, the more and more I listen to, I realize how kind of, it sounds rude, but like scrappy a lot of it is. Like it's not particularly tight on the grid, but they're tight together as a unit. But it wanders like massively. My favorite stuff it's got there are wrong notes in the horns, or do you know what I mean? There's like buzz on the bass track or whatever it is. You can hear all this stuff and you kind of go, do I care? No.
Yeah, the performance. I think that's what's been fascinating about, there's obviously a lot of multi-tracks of old stuff that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, let's find this. I mean, obviously the Stevie one straight away. And it's like, a lot of that is raggedy, but it's the way it all comes together. And it's just got a vibe.
You can't believe it, like individually, but it's bigger than the sum of its parts, isn't it? It's just the feel of it. I'm always intrigued by that. When I even recording my own stuff, I'll record, I'll put a guide piano thing down just to record drums to, and I'll play drums. And I'll record some bass. Then I'll solo the bass and go, what the hell were you doing? What were you thinking? Are you drunk, or like, what's going on? And then you put the drums back in and go, oh no, it's fine. Like I think that's a skill I'm still really kind of developing, and I've been working it for a long time. Is to take that step back and kind of go, does it feel good? Yeah. Okay, then. Like, and stop tinkering with it now.
Yeah.
Like, just don't touch it anymore, because it's like a painting, isn't it? If you overdo it, it's going to go downhill pretty quickly.
Yes.
That's been really liberating. I'm really enjoying actively finding drum hits that aren't quite on the grid and looking at them and saying, yeah, that's fine.
That's amazing. A million years ago, I used to do recordings of MIDI files from top flight drummers. And guitarists. We kind of did it all, it was like whatever the MIDI controller was, it was like Milton McDonald, MIDI guitar, right? Amazing. Play us some licks, record it. And obviously Milton's so on it that anything he plays. And anyway, I kind of had a little business doing some of that. But what for me as a drummer was fascinating was having recorded their grooves, was just going in, certainly with MIDI, in the MIDI domain, and just seeing where those things, and it was, certain drummers would kind of push certain things, certain bit lazy, others it was very clear they were kind of counting in their head very metronomically. And it was always the ones I was kind of like, the ones I gravitate to are the ones who are slightly late,
right?
Which I thought was kind of sort of summed me up a little bit, really. Just a little bit lazy.
It's funny, isn't it? Just on the sort of slight slow end of things. It's an unusual one. I find myself, you learn a lot about yourself when you do this as well. Where you don't edit, you don't rely on the edits. You start to realise I have a tendency to rush or to drag or whatever it is. So when I notice those things about myself, I can really kind of be aware of them while I'm recording and try and make sure I'm not doing that thing too much. So if I have a tendency to rush through fills or something, when it's time to do that thing, I try and make sure it's kind of go, actually take a breath, I think that helps long term. And of course, like touring and playing live is such a different beast. And I think in my adult life, I've played live way more than I have in a studio. And it's just a different thing, isn't it? Like live, it's all about how it feels in the moment. But on a record, it's like how it feels forever, so I want to kind of make sure it's not too wandery, or there's not too much in terms of stuff moving around. And of course, certainly the way I do it, because I'm on my own, it's not all of us playing at once, it's me playing one at a time. So you want to make sure that the foundation of it is solid before you move on to the next part. I guess that's why I have edited quite a lot in the past. Well, not quite a lot, but I have edited things that needed to. But I'm really enjoying.
Did I hear you were playing with Steve Winwood?
Yeah, we've done some rehearsals and stuff. That's it is what it is at the moment. I mean, I'm not sure what's going to happen with COVID, and I mean,
was that with a view to a tour or something?
Yeah. That was
okay.
That's been rescheduled like twice.
Oh wow.
So COVID things. So I'm at the moment I'm not thinking that far ahead, to be honest. It kind of is what it is. But that's another sort of multi-instrumental gig. Another thing where I happened to did a gig. So LP, the percussion company, did their 50th birthday, I think the 50th. Anyway, Ronnie Scott's and Scholler, who plays percussion with Jamiroquai, he's an LP artist, and they asked him to put some stuff together. So we played some tunes. Shola said, "Oh, sing one." So we did Another Start. I think maybe we did another tune. But I played the keys and sang, and Steve Winwood was in the audience. He's a big Cuban sort of percussion nut. He loves all that stuff. He was in the audience and just sort of enjoyed what I'd done and needed somebody to basically play bass, guitar, keys, sing. Like it's one of those where you do a bit of everything. It's been great to dig into his stuff. There's a lot of stuff I wasn't aware of, really. So to kind of hear his, he's going from that real rock band thing to those 80s kind of program things is amazing to hear. Really.
Yeah. And a reputation as a top bloke as well.
It's nicest guy.
Yeah, everybody
Super
I've
nice
spoken
guy.
to. In fact, I met his tech, Jet Jervis, who said, I think for his 40th birthday, Steve took him to, I don't know, it was Copenhagen or somewhere. It might have been Amsterdam.
Right.
Because he thought he should smoke a pipe at his age. And went and they cycled around everywhere and he bought him like the best pipe he could find. And that's
Yeah, that's
how
amazing.
cool is that?
That's amazing. Yeah, no, super nice guy. Just the whole vibe around it's just really lovely. Amazing.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you ever so much, Nate. It's been really interesting chatting
Thanks
away.
for having me. Thank you for having me. Pleasure.